Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's session of Unplugged with Ross. My name is Roslyn Miner. Tonight we are on episode 11, and the title is What's in Your Toolkit? Repacking for the Next Level. In tonight's session, I am so honored to have Margaret Newton, who's joining us from Johannesburg, South Africa. Margaret is the director of Be Human Group. She is a Clifton Strengths coach and she's a leadership facilitator. She works at the intersection of human growth and leadership development with experience in coaching, facilitation, curriculum design, and business leadership. Her approach is strengths based, practical, reflective, and deeply grounded in the realities of being human. Welcome, Margaret. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Rosalind. The honor is all mine. I appreciate the invitation.
Have you here. Now, based on tonight's topic, what's in your toolkit? I am tempted to actually go to dictionary.com and I was looking, what is the definition of a toolkit? And one of the definitions is a collection of tools or other useful equipment typically kept in a box or case. And the other definition is a collection of expert skills, knowledge, procedures, or information for a particular topic or activity. So that's the definition of toolkit. And just before we jump into the questions, it'd be nice to understand a few statistics or facts about the topic of the day. Interestingly, 95% of people believe they are self-aware. Only about 10 to 15% actually demonstrate strong self-awareness. 34% of employees globally are classified as thriving, while the majority are categorized as struggling. Interestingly, a Gallup report stat 28% of employees experience burnout very often or always. And this burnout has nothing to do with the hours worked, but more to do with their overall well-being. Which now brings us to the grounding of the topic. What in your toolkit? What are your initial thoughts, Margaret?
Those statistics makes me feel sad, Rosalind. I feel sad when I hear that because I think as human beings, I want everyone to thrive, to use their potential. Well, firstly to discover their potential, and then use and unpack their potential so that it helps them to thrive. I want people to be happy. I want people to be successful. That is the fundamental feeling I get. But to hear that those results, the statistics, it reminds me that part of being human fundamentally is also suffering. And a mentor that I had a number of years ago, and maybe some of the audience members may know him, Rick Warren. He was the writer of the book, The Purpose-Driven Life. He used to say, and I carry what he says with me every day. He says that life is like a train track. On the one end, you've got the bad. On the other, you've got the good or the great. They always seem to run together. If you're the train, one foot is in it's going great, the other foot is in the I'm really suffering. It always goes hand in hand. So hearing those statistics, makes me sad, and I wish that it was not so. But Gallup does their research very well, and we can trust their research. And I think this the other thought that I have is I want to make a difference. I want to be part of the solution to help people to thrive. Yeah. So those are my initial thoughts. Yes.
I love the fact that, you mentioned part of being human is suffering, and the fact that good and bad run concurrently. Now, which brings us to our first question. At what point do people realize they are carrying too much for too long?
Yeah, Rosalind, unfortunately, most people only realize it when they are burnt out. When they get to the point where they cannot get out of bed in the morning, when they start to experience health issues, you know, blood pressure, blood pressure that's just off the charts, way too high. Uh, they get the feeling that they don't want to talk to people anymore, so they become recluse. And at that stage, it's almost too late to pull back. That stage, they need serious help. So, in my experience, those are some of the symptoms. Yeah, yeah.
You've mentioned something that a lot of us experience, the physiological or health impact. When it comes to your health, you become reclusive, you don't want to speak to people. It could even be you're having aspects of anxiety, unfortunately, or even depression. Unfortunately, a lot of us had to look really good and confident and everything is okay externally. But internally, we are slowly dying. How can we, work because or identify when we are slowly dying inside and be in a position of speaking out or seeking help? Because an example to do, say, with suicide cases, a lot of people say, but she was looking okay, but he looked happy. But then when you dig deeper, internally, the person was having a really hard time. How do we go about that as people?
Yeah. So, Rosalind, I think the first step is to acknowledge the symptoms, is to familiarize yourself with the symptoms and then acknowledging it. The symptom that, or one of the symptoms is if you feel nothing, if things around you happens, and you feel nothing, you feel dead inside. That's a huge warning sign. I think the second thing is you realize that you're starting to run on autopilot, and that's exactly what happens with high performing people. Externally, so when I see people, the smile comes, the eyes lit up, uh, but it's that autopilot that that's running in the background. uh, they they look externally happy and driven and so on because they realize that if I don't do this, it may have a negative effect on my career. And interestingly enough, it happens specifically, or mostly, I would rather say. Now, I don't have statistics for this, but in my experience of speaking with over 300-400 women about this topic in the last 2-3 years, mostly women, or most often women, feel that they need to show that they're happy. They need to show that they're doing great, because women are very hard on each other, and it may have an impact on their career. And for some reason, we feel that we need to show that we've got it all together. and specifically high performing women feels that's what they need to do. I can do it all. The kids, I can, run the household. I can be high performing at work. I can be the head of HR, the head of operations. I've got it, But that feeling of feeling dead, being on autopilot, being performing. That's I almost want to call it a deadly combination, and that often leads to very serious mental health issues that can lead to suicide.
You've mentioned things that, that's the current reality of the world. However, the society or the environment we are in is demanding more and more of us. So if, let's say, you are to look at a workplace environment where there's a lot of, automation, a lot of tech coming into play, the impact of AI, a lot of people are losing their jobs. So people are thinking, I need to save my job, I need to, save my income. So you're finding yourself pushing yourself in a bid not only to survive, but also there are people that are in situations whereby they are the relationships that they have in their lives are transactional. We have men who will be valued simply based on how they provide. There are women who you may be with child at the moment, but you feel your job is threatened. So when you go back to the office, you have to prove yourself 0 to 100. How do you get a fair balance? Because all this burnout, as we've seen through the statistics, is mainly to do with well being and less to do with work. So, how can we go about getting a fair balance of that?
Rosalind, let me tell you, it's very difficult. It's very difficult. The women, let me not be specific. Let me generalize. People who thrive in the workplace and in their lives are, and now I'm talking about genuinely thriving. They are people who intentionally says, I'm going to slow down. I'm going to make time to check in with myself. When we're not thriving, when we're suffering emotionally, a lot of times it is because of our thinking world. There are thoughts that comes up. There are thoughts that we believe that may not be true. And we don't take time to sit still, stand still, slow down to interrogate those thoughts. And so we keep on believing it, we keep on making decisions based on it, we keep on running our lives based on what is often lies that we believe about ourselves and others. And in my experience, it has less to do with what's happening outside of us and a lot more to do with what is happening inside of us. And for that reason, I'm an advocate for slowing down and building a relationship with yourself. We're very good at building relationships with others. Well, some are better than others, right? But for some reason, the person whom you spend every second with in 70, 80, 90 years, that person we don't build a relationship with. So I'm very passionate about this notion that in order to thrive, we need to build a relationship with ourselves. You need to get to know yourself, who you are, what your thoughts are, and it's a process. It's not just a one-time thing. You don't just do an assessment and then suddenly you build that relationship. Yeah, did I answer your question?
It does, and it actually highlights something that, let's say, let me generalize, people struggle with being friends with yourself. Because the moment, first things first, there are people that cannot sit still. They need noise, they need activity. That's where they get their energy from. There are people that cannot sit still in their thoughts because their mind feels too loud and they are not willing to interrogate why that is happening. And truth be told, when you go on a self discovery mission, self awareness, true self awareness, it is very scary because that's when you realize the mind is a very powerful thing. That is when you come to appreciate where you dropped the ball, what you need to do. You start realizing that. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. You know, you will just want to push it back in the subconscious. But if you want to thrive, you have to go through that journey. What are some of the, what can someone do? Someone who's never stopped, someone who's never stood still. Maybe it's the first time. What would you encourage them to have maybe as their first step?
Rosalind, to take that first step takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage. So for the listeners who do that, I want to acknowledge your courage firstly, because it's not easy. It says that you want to make different decisions. You want to make it. You want to build a different life, and it's difficult. So the first step is to take courage. Now, a friend of mine, Sumari, she always says, courage never feels like courage. It feels scared. It feels unsure, uncertain. So if you feel like that, just make the decision. So take courage. So that's, I would say, step number one. Step number two is when you're at that point of where you realize, listen, I'm in trouble here. I need to do something. I cannot keep going on this road. There's going to be distraction at the end of the road. Is to ask for help. Help can be in several forms. A psychologist. It could be a coach, or it could be a friend. It could also be a book. And yeah, that would be the two things that I would say. First, take courage, and secondly, ask for help. That's very important.
Those are very good, strong recommendations, and I think something that we can all relate to. And the fact that, courage in this sense, we are not seeking perfection, we're just seeking progress. So, to build on that, many people know how to achieve, but not necessarily how to be. Why do you think that happens?
Yeah, Rosalind, that's that's such a great question. I think you can only be when you understand the being of who you are. You know, who am I? My coach, and I've worked with the B part. I think we're going on to 4 years now, and he has this thing where he says that you've got You're either goal orientated or you're soul orientated. Um, Goal orientation means I set those goals, right? And I'm pursuing it relentlessly against all odds. I'm putting in the work. So that's your goal work. Okay? Nothing wrong with that. But then there's the soul work that you have to do, where you look inside yourself. You you go to a quiet place and you start to journal. Um, you start to journal what thoughts are coming up and start to notice those patterns of thought that may get in the way of of your of how you show up, of how you feel, of how being present feels like. And that's why we call it being present, not just present. I'm being present. And that is I'm putting myself, my listening, my what I see, my thoughts. I'm putting it with you, and that's being present. And that is a lesson that has been so helpful to me personally, by asking the questions: who do I need to be in order to go where I want to go? Who do I need to be?
Those are very, the questions seek deep introspection, especially, when you say you're either goal oriented or soul oriented. Goal oriented comes through as, ambition heavy. Soul oriented comes through as introspection heavy, and introspection heavy demands for you to bear yourself in layers that you're not seeking the perfect answers, but at the end of the day, you are trying to discover who you are, what you want to be, and the journey that it is that you're taking. Interestingly, I had a question on the same, slightly different, that goes: how do people know the difference between ambition and overcompensation?
That's another great question. Rosalind, just before I answer, I just want to make a comment on something that you just said.
Yeah.
You mentioned what I want to be. And it's so interesting. We're starting to work with university students, and sort of here 17, 18 years of age, the big question becomes, well, what do you want to go study? What do you want to be? I want to be a doctor, or I want to be an accountant, or something like that. But no one asks the question, who do you want to be? Who do you want to be in your 20s? And I think that's a character question, isn't it? But not just a character as look great from the outside. Just to, who are you? Who do you want to be? How do you want to show up uh, in this world that has so much to offer, so many opportunities, but also so many heartache. So that was just something that I caught, is what, we asked the question, what do you want to be? We never asked the young ones, who do you want to be? And I think it's so important.
I couldn't agree more. You took me back to a conversation that I've had previously with a psychiatrist. And we got to a point whereby, and it's just building to what you've said, when you are young, you have a certain visual of what you would want to be, a visual of the goals that you would like to achieve by a certain age. And life happens, and you surpass that age and you continue. So let's say you had your goals that you wanted to achieve by the time you're 29 years old, and you're currently a 43-year-old person who is still trying to achieve, what you had set out back in your 20s. and you're being very hard on yourself, not realizing that not only did you journey what you wanted, but there are other experiences that the 20-year-old person was not aware of, neither did they experience. So the need for someone to give themselves grace, that for the things that you've achieved, well and good, kudos. And for those that you didn't, how did that come about? And at the end of the day, what did you learn, or what have you learned so far in the journey?
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Now, back to the question, difference between ambition and overcompensation.
Ambition always starts with good intent. The intention that I want to be successful, I want to show my family, and also I want to something to myself. And I think ambition is a good thing. I think when it comes to overcompensation, the question is, am I starting to carry? Uh, is it starting to weigh me down? Does it feel like I'm carrying something very heavy on my back? Does it feel like I'm walking with a backpack full of rocks? You know, um, when it starts to feel that way, and you start to push through, and you start to you start ignoring the signs that something's going very wrong within my soul, my body. I think that overcompensation can become very dangerous. Then it can cause heartache. I think it can cause problems. What I'm seeing is that a lot of people who overcompensates do so because they they believe they're not good enough. They've got self beliefs that prohibits them from living freely, from feeling free. And that's also what I saw in my own life. Is I it was also it was almost like I had to let me rephrase, the person that I had to show or impress the most was myself. And it was because I didn't believe that I could do something really special or do something that makes a difference. And so I started to overcompensate, work harder, ignore the warning signs that I'm working whole weekends without spending any time with family and friends, and what we typically call a balanced life. And I think overcompensation, if you look at a scale, overcompensation is also when the one side weighs heavier than the other, and it over, overcompensates. It's not in balance. I think that's for me the difference between ambition and overcompensation. Ambition, I think, is healthy if you make sure that you've got some checks and balances in place. People who make sure that you eat healthy, that you get some exercise, that you're that you have the support that you need to live a balanced life. Although I do sometimes think a balanced life is a myth, but you gotta understand what gives you joy. I call it the blue zone. Can I share
Yes,
something about the blue zone?
yes, please.
I think that'll also help us to understand ambition and overcompensation. So I've got a Garmin watch, and the Garmin watch has a feature that it calls body battery, right? And when I feel that I'm striving, that I'm overcompensating, and when I am overcompensating, it my body battery picks it up as stress, and so it shows that it shows spikes, yellow and red, into the stress zones. When I'm ambitious, and doing an activity that that uh, that fits in with my strengths and who I am and who I'm being, who I want to be. It shows blue. It shows that I'm resting. And so I've tracked it over the last 6 months. And whenever I do coaching or I do present a workshop, facilitate a workshop, or I'm really listening to people talk to me about their stories, telling me their stories. It shows up on my body battery as blue. And so what I've now done is I've identified blue zone activities and red zone activities. And I'm trying to intentionally focus more on blue zone activities, because that's where I know that's where um, I have ambition in those areas, but to my body and my nervous system, it feels like rest, right? But when I'm
Yeah.
striving, as as in that shows us up as stressful. So those activities I should do less. I can't eliminate them from my life, but intentionally lessen those areas. Yeah, yeah.
You've provided a really good practical example that we can all apply. When you really know what you're good at, when you know what pours into you and what drains you. So the the advice here is to identify, activities and things that actually don't feel like work to you because you enjoy them, you thrive in them. But where you find yourself in situations or activities that would be draining to you, you cannot get rid of them, but you need to have less and less of those situations. And then I think the next step would be identify how you can remain calm in environments that are not bringing out the best of you. So, yeah, your example is absolutely spot on.
Thank you, Rosalind. And you know what you just mentioned is the reality for 99%, for human beings. The situation that or where we get um, into situations, but also if we just look at the economic situation in many countries, especially here in Africa, you need to keep your job, but maybe you're sitting with a manager that's making life very difficult for you, or you're in a job that you don't love. It creates a lot of stress for you. What do you do in those situations? Um, well, Byron Katie, a coach that I think she's doing amazing work. She has the saying, if you fight with reality, you will lose 100% of the time. And so it is not about pressing those emotions down, pressing those feelings of frustration down, because then you're going to become depressed, right? But it's to slow down, to go and sit with a journal, to write out what you feel, to acknowledge the reality of what you're feeling. And I also want to say in this conversation that that's also a first type of step. that you can do is acknowledge the reality. This is how I feel. This is why I feel how I feel, and have that discussion with someone in your support system, so that you can get it out, because it will go and sit in your body. And if that's something that you want to look at, just go and search for the work of Byron Katie, Byron, and his surname Katie, Kate. She's got a lot of exercises on her website that you can use, so that you can release those feelings. Yeah.
I love the fact that, the reality, if you fight reality, you will lose 100%. But going a step further, acknowledging that reality and then being emotionally honest with ourselves. I think emotions are not very nice to sit in, because they demand for that level of honesty for you to fully understand that feeling. And sometimes if the emotion is negative in nature, you really want to just push it aside and just go to be nice and happy. But I have come to appreciate that when you sit in that moment, no matter how bad it is, when you acknowledge what it is that you're feeling, when you let yourself go through the motions and you're emotionally honest with yourself, you actually walk away having more clarity of what you need to do next than when you push it aside, when you suppress it and expect everything to work out of the blue. Yeah. So
Now,
we've gone through you know identifying the degree of the weight we carry as people. We've gone a step further and bringing our identity beyond our jobs, our families, and everything that we do. The need to be still and having that honest conversation with yourself. We've also looked at the internal audit, you know having an internal audit of what you need to do, understanding why are you avoiding silence, why are you avoiding stillness. Now let us look at the strengths, the self-awareness. The first question is, we often hear people say, know your strengths. But what does that practically mean in everyday life?
yeah, Rosalind, that's a great question. So for me, knowing your strengths is understanding what you're naturally good at. Understand what gives you energy. Which activities, when you do it, you ask the question, when can I do it again? It's that energy. It's something that you instinctively know what to do well. No one has taught you. No one has you didn't do a course. You just instinctively know what is the next step. So Mika said Seminai calls it flow. So he wrote a book called Flow. It's, I think, 30, 40 years old already. But those are the principles, and those, know your strengths.
So with that,
There's also
then,
sure.
sorry,
Please
please
go
proceed.
ahead. Okay. There's also an assessment that we use called the Clifton Strengths Assessment by Gallup. And that assessment measures your potential for excellence. In other words, those areas in which you are very talented at. And if you focus on those areas, if you focus on developing those talents, that's when you get into the blue zone. Even if it's things are difficult at work or in your life, if you know what you're great at, which situations to look for where your blue zone will show up, that helps a lot.
So identifying our strengths, and yes, as you've mentioned, I think that would be a good recommendation. Reach out to you and do a Clifton Strength assessment and see or identify what we are good at. But then human nature is also good at misusing or overusing the strengths to our detriment. How can we, or rather, how do people misuse or overuse their strengths without realizing it?
Yeah. So, may I use an example of one of my strengths?
Yes, please.
So I've got a strength in it's a Clifton Strengths talent. It's called maximizer. People with maximizer love to take things from average to excellence. It's a value that they carry. It gives me tremendous joy when I work with someone and they really become great at something that they do. The flip side of that, the blind spot, the overuse of that is that I become very picky. Um, so I struggle with that perfectionism, So I constantly have to remind myself it's not necessary to be perfect. 80% is good enough. What does excellence look like for me? Excellence is not the same as perfectionism, and I've struggled with that for as long as I can remember, where I projected on people and say, listen, you need to be perfect in this, um, and unfortunately in my life I had to ask for a lot of forgiveness where I've hurt people because I've pushed them too hard and so on. So yeah, that's the personal what it looks like in my life.
Thank you for sharing that personal perspective. Oftentimes, people, think that working on your weaknesses is also a way of improving. However, I remember one of my former bosses, we used to say, we build on strengths, not weaknesses. Because a strength you can build from here to Timbuktu, but for a weakness, you can only do as much. And this now brings the question, what is the danger of constantly trying to fix weaknesses instead of understanding how we are wired? How can we walk away from that mentality of, let's fix your weakness? But if you work on the strengths with time, it will have a domino effect of naturally the weakness is going to improve without having to do much effort. What are your thoughts on that?
Mm. So Rosalind, for me, it's the left hand, right hand analogy. If you're right-handed, that's your dominant hand, then consider that your strength. It comes very naturally. You can write different ways. So you can write block letters, you can write calligraphy, you can you can write um, yeah, block letters and calligraphy.
Mhm.
You can also write fast, you can write slow. You don't have to think about it because it comes naturally, right? If you want to learn a new way of writing, the growth will be exponential. Compare that to your left hand. So I'm right-handed, so it's for me very difficult to write with my left hand. I have to think about it. It goes very slowly because I have to concentrate. I now have to write from left to right. I have to hold the paper. Uh, it's it's difficult, And if you ask me to write with my left hand for the next 3 months, I'm going to get very frustrated, right? If you're going to put pressure on me to write faster, and more readable, I'm really going to get frustrated because it doesn't come naturally. And so the growth, or let me put it this way, will I become better at writing with my left hand? Yes, I will, because I will become used to it. Will my left hand ever write as good as my right hand? No. With your strengths, if you focus on your strengths, there is exponential growth. If you focus on your weaknesses, you will only get incremental growth. And it will come with a lot of frustration. And I think life is hard enough to have those frustrations, to add those frustrations of writing with our left hands, our non-dominant hands. Yeah. Yeah. Is that helpful?
Very helpful. And I think, the analogy, it's actually not even analogy, it's practical. The visualization of you can only go as much if you're just working with a weakness, but you can grow in leaps and bounds when you are focused on the strengths, and you will get better and better. All through this discussion, there's one theme that is coming through very clearly: the need for self awareness. So, how does self awareness change the way people lead, relate, parent, work, or make decisions?
I think it makes the world of difference. Because with self awareness, you can interrogate what you're believing about a person, what you're believing about the situation that you're in, what you're believing about yourself. And one insight can change the trajectory of your life. I think self awareness will make the world of difference for people. It can also take away your suffering,
True.
because a
Very
lot of our
true.
suffering, a lot of our emotional suffering, let me just be clear, a lot of our emotional suffering is because of how we see things and how we think about things. Yeah.
And it can be, valid, or it can be as a result of anxiety, and therefore you are
Yeah.
going through the motions of something that you cannot validate. Now, building on that, let us look at, the relationships, the environments that you are in. Sometimes growth is less about skill and more about emotional capacity. Kindly expand for us on that.
Yeah. I think it's such a great point. Um, if we get too busy, and again, I want to bring in women here because women have to look after the children, they have to look after their partners, they have to look after the manager, their job, and so there's very little emotional capacity for themselves. Um, I do wish that one day that flips, where women will realize that creating emotional capacity for themselves first, when they that will fill their bucket, will overflow into the rest of their relationships with their children, their partners, their at work, etc. And that life could be very different, if they create emotional capacity for themselves first and then give it out to others. Because the saying, you can't give what you don't have.
True. Very true.
And slowing down, looking inside, taking the time to get to know yourself will create that emotional capacity. That's my belief.
And I support that belief. You cannot pour from an empty cup. And sometimes you need to stop and pour into yourself, see yourself, put yourself first, not out of guilt, but as a necessity, and everything else will fall into place. Now, we may know someone, might be in college, might be in family, might be a friend, we might be that person who repeatedly ends up in draining environments or relationships or patterns. Sometimes you wonder if they are self sabotaging or what is going on. Why does that happen? Is it because it feels safe, or they are just used to what that environment provides? How does that happen, and why does it happen?
Rosalind, I think a lot of times it's because we the example that we get from our mothers is that that's the way that you do it. And so and that's the mentor that we have, and that's what we do. We don't. Sometimes it's just because we don't know that there's a better or a different way.
For such a person that has never challenged the status quo, maybe you were raised in a very violent environment, and what your system has become accustomed to is you're always, you're guarded because you're always expecting the worst of a situation. And therefore, the moment or the day you experience something or someone who is not what you are so used to, you actually end up being very suspicious because you're thinking, what are they up to? For such an individual, what would you recommend for them to do to come to the realization that what you have undergone through previously does not, prescribe that that is the future for you? So you need to believe in yourself and realize that you deserve better. You are better. You don't have to continue in this raging cycle of all the negative vibes that come with it. What would you recommend for that person to do?
Well, I think the first step is for the person to make a decision that there is something that they want to change. And I think a question that we can all ask ourselves is, what is not working in my life? What's not working? By answering that question, it'll give you some ideas of what needs to change, right? And those are the areas in which you can start asking for help. Uh, Go on a search, search for books, uh, listen to podcasts, uh, where there are where amazing people share wonderful insights that can perhaps just be that spark. Again, I want to say one insight can change the trajectory of your life. So listen to those podcasts. If you have access to books, read those books. Um, but I would definitely say ask the question: what is not working in my life? That could be the start or the spark of for someone to change, or to seek out that change, and help to make the change.
And the realization that, you do deserve the best, and better happening to
Yeah.
you is not, you know, it's not a gift or something that comes and goes. It's something that can actually stay if you take the time to grow yourself, realize that this is not working for me, and then building a path that really works for you. But now let us look at how the environment is. Even let's look at in terms of community. In the world today, everyone just has too much going on in their mind. be it bills, be it family, job insecurity. There's so much that is going on that is pushing people's limits, and everyone is struggling in one way or another. How can we create a community of support for one another for us to grow? For if those that are, struggling with, a history of negative energy, negative environments, poor environments, low self-esteem, imposter syndrome, and all that stuff. How can we create safe havens as a community that people can express themselves, but also allow for growth?
Well, Rosalind, I think the first step is to seek out like-minded people in your community. And if you have the vision to start a conversation like that, is to invite people. Start with one person. Start a conversation. Get resources you can share with members of your community at work, etc. And then see, who do I connect with, who is also interested in wanting to have these type of deep conversations, and grow one person at a time. If you don't want to start the community, seek out, you know ask around. If there's anyone who, if you know anyone who does a lot of introspection and does a lot of self-awareness work, seek out those communities. We've got social media on Facebook. uh, Follow newsletters. That's also a way of joining a community. And one of the newsletters that I follow, the community that I follow, is the Conscious Leadership Group. The Conscious Leadership Group on their website has a lot of these self-awareness exercises, videos. There's Their website is so rich with content and questions, and every month I look forward to their newsletter because of the questions that they ask. The questions for self-awareness, questions to reflect on, etc. And although I'm not physically part of their community, in thought, I'm participating in the exercises and then the community. That would be my recommendation. Yeah. If you're then more serious about that, you join coaching programs that talks to this, or training programs, etc. Yeah.
Identifying your village, what works for you, identifying
Exactly.
materials that are going to build you, and you don't have to spend a lot of money trying to get the right resources. It doesn't have to be finance intensive, but the more you grow, then you can invest in coaching, invest in programs that elevate you as an individual and grow your self-awareness as you grow. So now, as we come to the tail end of this discussion, I cannot believe that we are already at the top of the hour. Repacking for the next level. What habits, mindsets, or emotional patterns quietly sabotage growth, and what can we do to ensure that we have internal transformation?
Yeah. So the first pattern is negative self-talk. If something happens, what do you tell yourself? No, I'm stupid. I cannot believe I'm an idiot. Are some of the examples, right? So I would recommend that once you're at the end of your day, just journal shortly, or make a short note, or even use AI and just record a short note. This is what I said about myself today. This is how I labeled myself today. See what is the patterns that comes up. Right. So that's how I talk with myself. That's one of the biggest ways in how I sabotage myself. And then the second one, which is a little bit more difficult to identify, is what are the lies that I believe about myself and others. But we've come to, the brain is set up in such a way that we believe everything we think. But it is also a master manipulator and liar to us, to ourselves. It tells us what we want to hear. And so to really interrogate that, is I would say that's a second pattern, or mindset. The third mindset is, if you don't have a growth mindset, if you don't want to change the things that are not working in your life, if you keep staying the victim, if you keep on saying everything happens to me, uh, that's going to keep you stuck for the rest of your life. Now,
So these are very, very key points. You need to identify yourself, your negative self-talk, and stop it. So let me say that again. You have to stop your negative self-talk, and you must identify the patterns of sabotage. And then next, you must come to the understanding what are the lies you believe about yourself and others, and also find out why you believe the lies. And then growth mindset, take initiative and stay away from the victim mindset, or why me, the I and self-pity kind of scenarios. You must go above that as an individual. Now, what does maturity look like that has nothing to do with age?
I think maturity for me looks like you've got insight. Insight in um, how your self-talk impacts on you as a person, and how that negative self-talk, the way you show up with others, has an impact on the world around you. Uh, the conscious leadership group says that you have to take full responsibility for your impact in the world. That means that you have to take full responsibility for your impact on yourself. Um, and I think if we can do that, that's when we become mature.
Insight on yourself. Again, we are going back again to the need for self awareness. It is driving a lot of what we are doing or how we are building our toolkit. In the world of social media, there are people that view whatever they see on social media to be the reality of the said social media personas, and it's not always the case. What advice would you give to, say, a young person, or even generally everyone? Because sometimes whatever you see on social media, the beautiful houses, the beautiful videos, the rich lifestyle, the comfort and all that, it is not always the truth. It's not always the reality. So how can we get people to stay away from that distortion and appreciate their journey and be proud of who they are, away from trying to fit in with what social media trends are seeking or portraying?
Rosalind, I think if we had an answer to that question, we will have a lot more mentally healthy people, right? I think, in the end, you can only take responsibility for yourself. And something that I've implemented is to, excuse me, look at a lot more, or sorry, a lot less social media. So I'm limiting my time. So usually after 7 o'clock, when I'm winding down, I would start scrolling, and I realized that pattern has a negative impact on me. So I've downloaded an app that blocks my Instagram and Facebook after 7 o'clock and only opens up after midnight. So that's one of the ways that I'm trying to take responsibility for my own mental health in that way, not to get sucked into the lie that is social media, because the reality is also the algorithms learn what you look at, and it feeds you things that makes you angry, because that's what keeps you on social media. Is you want to see what's the next what's the next thing, and then you just become angrier and angrier, and it just becomes a negative loop.
So the
You,
realization of
you become to compare. Yeah, you start to compare yourself with others. Look what they have, and then your life looks so boring, and so on. Yeah.
so we must realize our patterns on social media. So like for me, I think the only social media I'm on, or yeah, it's only LinkedIn. That's the only app I'm on. I'm not on Facebook. I closed out Instagram a while back because, yes, as you correctly said, you can find yourself glued to reel after reel after reel. And at the end of the day, once you're done, you're thinking, okay, so what did I just spend my time on? Just doom scrolling. So we must identify what our patterns are, and we must also identify that we are not seeking gratification from social media. It's not a competition, it's not a comparison. So your level of self-awareness, just realize that there are people that are just creating, you know, posts on social media because that's the way they earn money. But it's not a reflection of who they really are. And we must appreciate what our journey is. Now, two final questions. One, what are some growth rituals that genuinely help people stay grounded and aligned? Because I think we all need to get grounded. We all need to be grounded.
So what are some habits, growth habits, right? So yeah, Rosalind, I'm gonna come back to the growth habit of checking in with yourself on a daily basis. Doesn't have to be an hour, even if it's just 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes of how am I really feeling, and where am I at emotionally now. I think that's a good start. um, and then also getting in the habit of having deep conversations. Even if it's just pick one friend on a weekly basis, check in with one another. How are you doing? How do you feel? What's going on in your life? I think just those two seemingly small habits, which sometimes we don't feel we've got time for, that can I think that can make a big difference in the end. I think it has a compounding effect.
definitely does. And especially when you mentioned deep conversations, we are very quick to ask how are you? And someone goes, I'm okay. But you really don't, there are people who can go, oh, the way you said I'm okay does not sound right to me. Or the tone that you used. That person understands you beyond the I'm okay. Or you just give a facial expression and they're like, I am dropping this call and I'm coming over for a face to face. We need to have people that you can be vulnerable with and they actually know you for you, other than Margaret the coach, Margaret the leadership, the everything that that you're about externally, but zero about you internally. I think we need to change the that conversation, or the
Yeah.
metric. No more internally than we
Yeah.
know externally. To the final
So Esther
question.
Perel, if I can just build, sorry, if I can just
Yeah,
build on what you're saying. So Esther Perel, the world-renowned psychiatrist, she says something so profound. She says, "You've got a thousand friends on Facebook, but you have no one to look after your cat if you're out of town. You've got no one to ask."
yeah, that is a lot.
That's for me. That's so profound. Yeah, that's profound.
It is. Wow. To the final question this evening. This is a conversation I think we can actually have a much longer conversation, but for tonight, this is what we are going to tackle. The final question being, if anyone listening tonight could unpack one thing emotionally, mentally, or spiritually before entering their next season, what would you hope it is?
Who do I feel the most angriest at? If they
Okay.
can solve that, who do I feel the most angriest at? If they can solve the why, the who, they will go into the next season a lot lighter, with a lot more clarity and a lot less anger in their being. And there's an exercise on Byron Katie's website. It's called the Judge Thy Neighbor exercise. It's an exercise that walks you through that that anger, to unpacking that. And that is an exercise that's amazing. So it's something that your listeners uh, can use to great effect. Yeah.
That's a very interesting, introspective question, and it's heavy on anger. Why anger?
I think anger, well, firstly, when we're angry at someone, the level of anger tells me that there's something that you believe that's not 100% true. And chances are that that belief also plays out in several other areas of your life, with other with relationships, within situations, at work. So if you can get rid of that, the question then is, who would I be without this anger?
That's very deep. I haven't come across that that train of thought. Thinking, what am I angry about? Who am I angry with? Why am I angry? What is it that is conflicting? The anger is definitely conflicting with a self belief. What is it? Is it founded? Is it not founded? And I think by that question that you've asked, just by the way I'm breaking it down, it's exposing, wider and wider aspects that we really need to self-evaluate. Margaret, I cannot believe we've already surpassed the time, and I am beyond thankful for you coming through and giving us challenges, because every statement you said was a challenge for us to be better. The topic tonight is about toolkit, and you've made us realize what it is that we are entertaining, what it is that we are having. It's either growing you or breaking you. And oftentimes we hang on to a lot of negative traits and behaviors, clinging to them because that's what we are aware of. That is what we are used to. So that is what we are comfortable with, instead of challenging the status quo and allowing ourselves to experience what good is. Give us the opportunity for even us to identify or describe what good is for me. So thank you for challenging our thinking. Thank you for challenging our thought process. Thank you for making us go deeper and realizing that the more you're doing for others and the less that you're doing for yourself, you're just breaking yourself even more. What are your final thoughts or your final words as we come to a close?
Rosalind, I'm just so thankful for this opportunity to share about the things that have made the biggest difference in my life, that has changed my life so significantly, that helped me to believe in myself, that has such a as a ripple effect, a positive impact on the people around me as well as my clients and colleagues. So I'm deeply thankful for that. And I wish you all the best. You're doing a great job. And I see big things for you. So thank you. And I acknowledge the courage that you are taking every single time that you invite someone, you set up this conversation. It takes a lot of courage, and I want to acknowledge that.
Thank you, Margaret. To our viewers, YouTube, LinkedIn, thank you very much for your patronage. Please feel free to engage Margaret on LinkedIn. She's a Clifton Strengths coach. Let us be that person that knows what our strengths are, and we can work and better ourselves. As always, I thank you for your patronage, and I will see you on the next episode of Unplugged with Ross. Wishing you all a lovely evening. Thanks and goodbye.
Bye bye.